A few days ago was released a patch featuring the new hero Doomfist, and while yes, that's very exciting because every single time we have a new hero that ends up having some changes in the metagame, today I wanted to talk about something else, something that was featured in this patch trying to address once again stalling, right? So let's read that change that was featured in the patch notes. It said, adjusted the respawn timing to limit defensive stalling strategies when the offensive team has a clear advantage and plays aggressively. Now, never mind the fact that this is incredibly vague. We'll go into what that actually means a bit later. The core idea and the goal of this video is to do a retrospective of kind of like every attempt at fixing stalling that was made by Blizzard, pretty much through since the past year, since the release of the game. So we're going to go through every one of those changes and try to explain and hopefully convince you that none of these changes have actually fixed the core issue that is stalling, and that this latest change is still not going to fix the problem, right? So we have to go back about a year ago, probably even more than a year ago. Yeah. So like late June, early July last year. That was before the 1 hero limit change, right? So initially, Blizzard were saying that hero stacking was a core concept of their game and that they were not interested in 1 hero limit, right? So in consequence, in pro matches, you had people switching to multiple divas or tracers just to be able to stall, to go back on point, to go back on payload, and either to contest it as the defense, right? So like second point of assault maps or last point of a payload map, something like that, or even on the attack as they were kind of like losing and not being able to kind of close out a map, they would still be able to like go back and touch a payload, right? So we have a few very kind of like known examples of this. The first one being Envious, who had a diva defense on Hanamura. So if you type that in YouTube, Envious diva defense Hanamura, you will find the clip where they lost a fight on the second point of Hanamura, right? And they were still able to stall by just respawning as diva and then going onto the point one by one. Now, diva is a really good hero to stall because, well, you have the diva mech that has a lot of HP pool. At the time, it was 500, but a lot of that was armor, right? So you need to get through that and dealing with defense matrix during that time. So it takes a lot of time. And even when you do kill the mech, you still need to kill the baby diva so that there's actually no one on point. So they would swap to like 4 or 5 divas, just go one by one, coordinate who would be going onto point and just stall like this for a really long time while someone else was on like soldier trying to get control of the high grounds. And as soon as you get a kill, then maybe you had the opportunity to stabilize and actually defend the point, right? So initially losing control, right, but being able still with those swaps to get back in control of that point using those divas. So that was a very, very famous example. Another one, I believe it was Melty, but I wasn't able to find a clip of this. But from what I recall, it was Melty going multiple tracers to be able on attack in overtime to just every single time be able to touch the payload with those blinks coming back from spawns, and to eventually, because tracer also does damage, right, and you had all these tracers blinking around, be able to get some kills and actually close out the map even though it was like in overtime for like I don't know how many minutes, right? So after that, on July 19th, Blizzard, kind of like realizing that hero stacking like that was a problem, decided to enforce 1 hero limit, okay, in competitive play. And because it was now the official way of playing the game, every single tournament organizers switched to that. Whereas like before that, there was like the Gosu Gamer weeklies who were already playing 1 hero limit. But outside of that, like ESL was still trying to like stay with like the official word of Blizzard. So while yes, this 1 hero limit change was also done for like spectating reasons, because when you have 2 tracers on both teams, that's like 4 tracers blinking around, and like there was like double Winstons, double Lucius, it was impossible to spectate really. So yes, that played a part, but it was also trying to address the stalling aspect because you could go multiple divas, multiple tracers, right? In that same patch was a change made to overtime, right? So the fuse of the overtime would now burn quicker after 20 seconds of being in overtime. And once you hit overtime, every single player would have 2 extra seconds on their respawn time. So before that, overtime was like just a mechanic to say like, okay, boys, like the game's supposed to be over now, please wrap it up, right? But like it didn't really matter. You still had this like margin of window, this fuse burning down, right? And you could just every single time replenish that by simply touching the payload or the payload, the point, whatever, right? So people were doing it with tracers and divas and all that, right? So they tried to make this change thinking, okay, if we just every single time just add a bit of time to those respawn timers, eventually the game will probably end, right? So that was their first attempt at dealing with stalling, right? After that, we had on August 9 a pretty important change, which was that all defender spawns, the respawn timings were changed to 10 seconds on every single map. Now, before this, attack spawns were 10 seconds, but defensive spawns were 12 seconds. And now, across the board, it was all put to 10 seconds. So this was thought of having like a huge impact on like specifically assault maps because of how close the spawns are for the defense to the second point. So it's like, well, if every single time they just have 2 seconds less of being dead when they do get killed, you know, they're going to be able to stall a lot. But it didn't only have an impact on 2CP, it also had an impact on like every single payload map, because while those third points when you're trying to like close out Kings Row, trying to close out Nimbani, Dorado, all these maps, right? That last point was all of a sudden way harder to actually finish. Now, why is that? Because before this, the competitive format that was played by pretty much most tournaments was stopwatch, right? So you would just go the entire map, see what time you did to complete the map, right? And then compare with the time that the other team did. If you didn't finish the map, then you would have to go and take the time that took you to like get the first 2 points. So it wasn't a great format, right? Which was why Blizzard wanted to like move away with with the time bank. Now, time bank is not a very good name for that format, really. The better name would be that it's just about progress. It's just about distance. Okay, you have a certain amount of time. You have a time bank, right? But literally, it's like, okay, for this amount of minutes, how far can you push the payload, right? And if you do the entire map, that's fine. You're going to get an extra round to try to push it further, and whatever team pushes more is going to win, right? But there wasn't really this necessity to finish the map like there kind of was in stopwatch, right? So Blizzard could afford to just make the game a bit more defensive, the balance, push it a tiny bit more towards the defense, because it didn't matter if the attack did not finish the map, right? So that was like actually had probably a bigger change on payloads than it did really 2CP. Now, a few months later, we're now in November 15th. That was the global ult nerf, where every single ultimate in the game, right, had a cost increase of 25%. So this was actually a bigger change for Assault 2CP, right? Because before this, you would, on those assault maps, capture the first point pretty consistently because of just how the respawns are, right? The attack has their spawn kind of closer, so all you have to do is really reinforce, and you're usually able to cap that point, right? So you would win fights, you would get ult advantage, and then you would just try to go into the second point with that ult advantage and try to snowball, right? Now, all of a sudden, with the global ult nerf, well, after you win that fight on first point, you don't quite have those ults. You don't quite have that graviton. You don't quite have that nano blade, right? So, well, you need to wait a bit. You need to poke a bit, right? But if you're poking, they're building defensive ults, right? And they're poking back, so they're also building ults. So the entire like window of, okay, capping first and then having, one fight where you have the opportunity to snowball, that was not quite erased, but it was at least much rarer to be able to snowball like that. So for the most part, those second points were extremely hard since then to just cap. Before that, you had the opportunity to snowball. If you messed that fight up, then yeah, okay, it would still be the same thing of, well, you need to build ults again and you need to try to find a way to cap that second. But you had that window of opportunity where you might have been able to snowball. The next change that we need to go over, it's not too linked, but it did have an impact indirectly. It is the Anna Nade nerf on January 24th. So it didn't really have a direct impact on stalling, right? It's just that because of the meta shift going more towards dive, right? So dive tanks like Winston and Diva and flankers like Tracer and Genji and all that, right? Those were generally the picks that you wanted to have for like defensive stall, right? Characters with mobility that could use like a jump to get out of spawn faster and go back on point, you know, on the second points, right? So it didn't necessarily change stalling. It just made it so that it was much more efficient because you were already on those picks. Now, sure, if you're in a stall situation, you still might have someone go Mei to go back onto the point and just ice block and ice wall, you know, to keep stalling. But outside of that, you already have the Diva. You already have the Monkey that can primal rage and ult and stall for like an extra 10 seconds. You already have the Tracer that can blink on point, recall, blink again, you know, and just keep stalling those points. The next change was February 28th. We'll go back to that one because it's linked to the change of the latest patch. So we'll define that later, right? After that was April 11th when they changed the percentage required to actually get progress on points. It's kind of a weird way to say it, but basically on assault and hybrid maps now, you didn't necessarily need to get the full capture on that point, right? It was just, well, if you get 50% of that point, well, that's going to count as 50%, and the other team is going to have to do better. If they do better, they're going to win. If they don't do better, you're going to win, right? So much less draws, but first they kind of screwed up because, well, if you didn't touch the point at all, the other team only needed to like get 1%, so that was like kind of iffy. But 2 weeks later, they made the change where you needed at least 1/3 of that cap for it to work, right? So if you get 60%, the enemy needs more than 60. If you get not like less than 1/3, then you didn't really cap anything. And if you're able to defend, it can still be a draw. But it did significantly reduce the amount of draws, right? But that's kind of like just fixing a symptom, right? It doesn't really fix stalling in of itself, right? It just reduces the amount of draws that you have across those games, right? Just lessen the margin of error for those teams to get draws, right? And finally, we have this change on the latest patch that is basically a revision of the February change. So let's talk about it. Basically, you would have something called what they call the attacker's advantage, right? For like when you have more people on point than the defense, you would start building advantage, right? So there was this hidden timer, okay, that you'd have, and after 30 seconds of having this advantage, it would start to affect the respawn timings of the defense, right? So after 30 seconds of having this advantage, it would slowly start to ramp up all the way to 90 seconds where that would be capped, right? But few things. First, if you lost advantage, then the timer would be reset to 0, right? So all that for nothing. And second, even if you had the advantage for those 90 seconds, so a minute and a half of just being on point and having more people on point during that entire minute and a half, right? It still amounted to like about 1 or 2 seconds extra on those respawn times, right? Like maybe 3. The official numbers were never released, right? Not as far as I know. But like from my testing, it was still very, very... just not enough, right? And so the latest patch is a revision of that change where now if you lose the advantage for a few seconds, it's not quite going to start back from 0. It's just going to count down that hidden timer a bit and then start back from there. So that's, I guess, a good change, but not going to be much. And that 30-second to 90-second window has been changed to 15 to 75. So still a minute of having that advantage, but it starts earlier, right? So it should be helping, right? But I still don't believe that it's enough. And we're going to go... 2 days ago was... okay. Yeah. So we're going to go into an example to show you before this patch, an example of stalls, and then after the patch, another example.
Still, look at this, Misfits. They need to start playing the point now. 10 seconds on the clock. They need to be forcing out that overtime. Ultimates across the board. Christopher holding on to that Primal Rage. Shaz trying to build up his own Dragon Blade to defend it with. Zebasai collects a crucial kill onto Fisher there. This could be the opening that he needed. And now here comes the overtime. It's do or die time here for Misfits into the final moments. Shaz going to be using that Dragon Blade to full effect, slicing through the opposition, trying to find a kill onto Zebasai. What a sleep dart into the bio grenade, possibly salvaging this for his team.
EMP finesse coming up though as well. It's going to be hard for Misfits to deal with, but Zebasai gets another one. This Adder is running riot. 3 kills so far for the support player from Misfits, and it may well not be done. It's going to be Fisher pushing back in now. Zebasai finally falls. Fisher knew he had to deal with him, but they're on the point. Misfits are on the point. They've made some percentage, but the sound barrier now is going to make life a little bit harder. Christopher's low. He's down. Pulse bomb let loose by Tvik. This is where he steps up. It was Fisher to try to go for the bomb himself. It doesn't work. Tvik did better though. He got a decent on Snizzle. This might be it. Misfits are up on the point. Tvik comes in. Snizzle falls down. The Baby Diva is no more. Fisher has to stand tall here, but he can't. He's gunned down by Manhattan. Now the capture's underway. Hammers have time to stop this one. They had time to get in there. It's been contested on the last second. If Christopher leaves that point, it could be all over. Shaz trying to deflect here. Still in overtime. Barely there. 63. It's 1% different between these two teams. It's so close.
Unbelievable. The overtime ticking over. Misfits trying their hardest to really try and take this into the final moments. They've still got the players onto the point. Livix getting a crucial Dragon Blade, but what a post bomb. Fisher finishes it up, claims it for Hammers. Up.
So that was my team, Hammers, playing against Misfits at Takeover 2, which was in early June. And as you can see, they simply needed 64%, right, of that capture to win the map. But because we were just always getting back on point, keeping the game alive, right, despite the overtime, despite the more time on those respawn timings, right, we were still able for a really long time, for like a minute and a half, to keep the game alive. And during that time, you know, Fisher was able to have like 3 pulse bombs, and at the end, the final pulse bomb actually got 3 kills, and that allowed us to defend the point and win that map, right? So it's not like you're gonna win only by stalling. It's just stalling keeps the game alive, keeps the status quo, and gives you potentially the opportunity for a game-winning play, like what happened, right? And so this was obviously before the patch, before the latest patch, right? But it had every single other change that we listed, and yet, right, you still had, even though they had got the initial picks, they got onto the point, they were starting to take the point, right, we still, right before 1% before they actually won the map, we got back on point. We always had someone on point, right? And eventually that gave us an opportunity to make a play and win the map. Now, I don't think that should have happened. I think, like, with the push that they had, Misfits should have been able to win that map, right? Now, sure, we won the map. We're happy about that, but I don't think that's a good mechanic for the game. Big shout out to Uber and Bren for making this as like hype of a cast as possible, but really, like, it was just constant action where, like, you don't really know which way it's gonna go, and at the end, you know, it kind of falls flat. Oh, all of a sudden it's over. Okay, let's try to hype this up, but that's not really all that good spectating wise, right? So as I said, this was before the patch. Now we're gonna have another example from after the patch. This is Scrim footage, so thanks to FNRGFE for being cool and being okay with me showing this footage.
Did they beat, guys?
Oh, it's coming first?
I don't know.
Yeah, they don't.
On me,
yeah,
help back.
They definitely beat it. There's 4 of them here.
Yeah,
They beat us.
we can maybe win here.
Yeah, I think we're
Don't
okay.
push that. Don't push that.
Yeah, I'm on him.
I'm going for it.
Which
One up, one up.
One kill.
Which point is though? Okay.
Come in, Lucio.
Tracer's coming out.
One. Tracer out.
Yes.
Lucio half HP.
Lucio kan dø.
Kill Lucio, right hand.
I'm peeling, speeding
I'm
on
on Lucio.
shield.
Dead. Which
One
is
is on me
now?
and help and help.
Diva, D-Mac.
Killing point.
I've played it. I've
got the mini.
I wanna play this. Oh, fuck.
Focus Sombra now.
Doom versus 1.
Tracer on me.
Do fist.
I'm
gonna die.
Tracer
fuck?
dead. Tracer dead. Lucio low.
Sombra
I'm
dead.
close to beat. I'm staying
Okay,
alive.
left side.
Back on point.
Gonna-
I'm on monkey.
I
Winston
can
on the
beat
left.
if you need it.
Diva, right hand.
Diva. Gonna be
Tracer
Doom
right
first and
side.
Tracer next.
They have
Careful
us.
for the Doom first.
Yeah, I'm on him.
Beating.
Play
What is this, sir?
Sombra dead. Sombra.
Tracer half HP. Tracer right
Got
side.
the Doom. Okay, I'm on
Tracer
Tracer.
track two.
Winston now.
One more here.
Yeah, Winston now. Let's look up
Lucio,
top.
Lucio, Bob.
Lucio.
I'm hacking Diva.
One Diva. Lucio, half HP, 1 HP, right
One
on.
smoke. Diva can
Who's
die
just
quick.
super low?
Get with the
Diva
one
dead.
shot first.
Dead.
Nice. Sombra on point.
Lucio, 1
Left
HP.
side. Oh my god, McCree's left side.
Okay, careful. Winston can die.
I'm gonna
McCree?
hack. I'm gonna hack this.
I'm
Make it
hacked.
soon.
I'm dead.
McCree, half HP.
Winston very low.
It's hacked. You need to hack it.
Kill him. Kill him. Kill him.
I'm trying.
I
Ulting.
hacked it.
Guys at 4.
We
down.
have to make a hacked.
Okay.
They're
Got Diva.
Can be,
Wait,
can be.
okay.
Mage,
I'm on this.
Mage McCree.
McCree, I'm on him. I can't die.
Coming back.
Lucio
Okay.
can die.
Lucio, come here, Lucio.
Need with it. Good fuck.
I'm
Lucio
D-Max.
half HP on point.
Watch out, Doomfist ult.
No way, dude. Fucking
Yeah,
Lucio.
Doomfist.
Anna. Kill Anna. Right.
Right, reset.
Oh my
Reset.
god. I have to make a hack though.
I hate this game.
So this clip was a 2-minute long fight, right? Where we got the initial pick because they played a bit too aggressive up front, right? We got the initial pick. We moved the fight onto the point, right? We kept getting kills. At some point during that fight, it was 17 kills to 1 for us, right? 17 kills to 1 before they eventually at the end were able to like get some picks, right? But we used 8 ults. They used 8 ults, right? 17 to 1. At some point that became like 20 to 4 or something, and then at the end they got the final kills, right? But they were still able to stall during all that time to eventually get the picks, the one-shots with the Doomfist and the McCree ult at the end to be able to win. We even were able to keep the Sombra, the enemy Sombra, dead enough so that the health pack would not be hacked by them anymore onto under the bridge, so that we could take control of the health pack. That's like a huge thing on Anubis if you're able to like steal that health pack away, basically, right? And despite all that, we weren't able to get more than 2 ticks. We had a tick before that fight already on the point, and we got a second tick, which is okay, but we weren't able to finish the map despite like because of this 2-minute stall, right? So it's a bit ridiculous. They allowed me to FNRG were okay with me showing this because they also thought it was a bit silly, you know, despite playing aggressively like the patch notes said, you know. So stalling is still a thing. It's still absolutely a thing. You go back on point, right? And it's been pretty much the right way to play the game for a really long time, to try to stall as much as possible, right? A solution that a lot of people have been talking about for like many months is to say, oh, well, just put the defensive spawns further on 2CP, right? But that would be another band-aid, right? It would just change the balance of those assault maps so that they're a bit more attack focused, but then all of a sudden those assault maps are just like, well, extremely hard to defend maybe, and then you just, well, it's round after round after round of just like who can snowball better, you know. That wouldn't be more interesting, I don't think. So no, that would just be another band-aid and not still fix the issue of stalling, right? Because sure, I showed 2 examples on Anubis, and so like 2CP and specifically Anubis, well, because that's because of Sombra and that health pack that's under the bridge that really hasn't helped much. But the core issue is still there on the other game modes, right? If you saw the Apex finals yesterday, or like depending on your time zone, maybe 2 days ago, I don't know. But Lunatic High versus Kangdu Panthera, on payloads, Lunatic High won every single payload because they were better at stalling. And outside of Numbani, where Kangdu Panthera was able to like push that payload, and if you saw the match, you'll know why. But outside of that, every single time Lunatic High was just stalling that payload on that 3rd phase before the final cap, using their Sombra Tracer strategy with like the 2 supports. So it's an issue that's on every single game mode. It's not limited to Assault, and just like changing the spawns on Assault would not solve the core issue, right? Even on Control or King of the Hill, however you want to call it, right? We've seen for the past few months a lot more of these Fair Mercy compositions that also have the Monkey, the Diva, right? And it's really all about poking with the Fair Mercy, hoping you get a pick, right? So playing kind of slow and trying to capitalize off of those picks or that poking. And then once you get the point, it's incredibly hard to retake off of you because of the stall potential that you have. You have the Monkey that can get back to point from spawn very quickly because of his jumps. But if he has ult and he's on point, he can stall for a long time. D.Va can stall with her mech and ulting to get back in mech. Fair Mercy, if she's up in the sky, it takes really long to kill her. If the Mercy has res, she can res people on point. More stalling. The Lucio can wall ride on the point, keep stalling. The Tracer can get back from respawn very quickly, right? And you have these 99 to 99 situations where it still stays in overtime super long, right? And yeah, like even if you don't have the close spawns, people get back on point and it just stalls, right? So this is an issue across all game modes, not just 2CP. So people need to stop saying, oh, it's 2CP, just fix 2CP. Like 2CP has issues because of it. It's very unfun to play because of it, but this is an issue across all game modes. So here is my solution, and it's debatable if that's the right way to go or if it's specifically those numbers that we should go for. But the main idea is to rework entirely how progress works, how pushing the payload works, how capping a point works, right? Currently, the mechanics is the progress speed is capped at 3. So if you have 3 people on the payload, that's maximum payload speed, right? Even if you have 6, right, that's not going to change. But 6 people pushing the payload can be stalled by 1 person. 6 people on a point can be stalled by 1 person on that point, right? And that's the core issue. Because if you properly rotate and coordinate who's going onto that payload, you're just stalling it pretty much forever. Like, sure, the overtime makes it harder. Sure, if you fuck up and 2 people die at the same time, it's going to make it harder and all that. But those are like just workarounds. The core issue is still there, right? So here's would be my solution, my numbers. It's say you get progress onto pushing that payload or capping that point if you have more than twice the amount of people stalling. Okay, so numbers wise, what would that do? If you have 6 people pushing the payload and there's 3 people stalling, okay, they have the numbers. They have 3 people. You don't have more than twice the amount of people that they have, so you're not getting progress. But if you kill one of those 3 and you still have those 6 people on point, then all of a sudden, twice the amount would be 4 for them, right? So you have more than that, so you get a bit of progress. You kill someone else, so it's only 1 person stalling the payload. Well, it's still 1 person, so you're not getting maximum speed, right? But it's a bit better. And then if you kill that person, then there's 0 people on the payload, then you get maximum payload speed, right? And you could scale those numbers down for like every single amount of people pushing the payload or stalling the payload, right? If you kept that formula, I think it could work. Now, we could change those numbers. We could change that formula. We can even adapt the payload speed itself for the balance of the maps. Keep that formula, just change the payload speeds for it to work. And like, of course, I'm talking about payload, but also for like progress. The issue is that stalling is basically this like state of limbo that lasts for like anywhere from like 30 seconds to a minute or 2 minutes sometimes, right? Where neither team is really winning, right? It just kind of prolongs this phase, and the attack is trying to close out and the defense is trying to survive, to recover, to stabilize, right? But neither is really winning, right? It's just stalling, right? Now, if you like these stalls and if you don't really understand why it's bad for the game from like a spectating standpoint, we would need to have like a broader conversation about pacing and about hype and about spectator engagement in like other forms of entertainment, all that stuff, right? But like, it's already been a pretty long video, so just to keep it short, the thing is, constant action is good as a player because it keeps you involved, it keeps you stimulated. Comparing to like Counter-Strike, you die, you're dead for the entire round. Well, sometimes that's a bit boring, especially when you're not very good. You die a lot at the start, right? In Overwatch, well, you die, you just wait 10 seconds and you're playing again. Amazing, right? But for spectating, it's different, right? It's different. It's not about constant action, right? It's about those short moments that are amazing, right? And before that, those very, very hyped moments, they never last for more than 5, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. But before that, you might have buildup, right? That XPK in League. it had build up, right? But the moment itself didn't last that long. That the play at TI2 in Dota, same thing. The play itself didn't last very long. There was build up to it. The casters could like create a narrative around that, right? In Overwatch, we don't really have that, right? It's just very constant action, and overall, the game itself is not paced extremely well. And in that regard, stalling really doesn't help.